My name is Sarah Martinez, and I'm 32 years old. 3/select weeks ago, my entire world shifted when, quote, I discovered I had won $52 million in the Powerball lottery. As I stared at those 6 matching numbers on my phone screen, my hands trembling with disbelief, a thought crystallized in my mind that would change everything. I wouldn't tell a soul about this money. Not yet. See, I have a complicated history, liquor with my family when it comes to finances, and I needed to know who recognized me when I had nothing to offer in return. If you're reading this story right now, drop a comment letting me know where you're from. Before I tell you about the most revealing experiment of my life, please like and subscribe to hear more real stories about family loyalty and betrayal that might just change how you see your own relationships. Before that life-changing Tuesday in October, my existence was painfully ordinary. I worked as a senior accountant at a mid-sized marketing firm in Austin, Texas, making just enough to live comfortably in my modest one-bedroom apartment near downtown. The job was demanding, with 55-hour work weeks becoming routine reporting periods. My days started at 6 a.m. with strong coffee and ended around 8 p.m. with takeout and Netflix. Unnamed. My family situation was, to put it mildly, complicated. My parents, Robert and Linda Martinez, divorced when I was 15 and both remarried within 2 years. My father, Robert, a high school chemistry teacher, married Jennifer, a successful real estate broker with expensive tastes and an even more expensive lifestyle. They lived in a sprawling house in Westlake Hills, complete with a pool and Chever 3-car garage. Rhonda and Mary Linda found love with David Chen, a prosperous software consultant who had accumulated significant wealth, but maintained an iron grip on every dollar. They resided in a beautiful home in Cedar Park, and David made it clear from Detreated was for my mother and any children they might have together. They never did have children, but the boundary remained. I have 2 siblings who couldn't be more different. My younger sister Monica is 28 and has always been Kang, the golden child. She graduated from UT with honors, married Kevin, a successful orthopedic surgeon, and now lives in a magazine-worthy home in Tarrytown with their twin daughters. Everything in Monica's life appeared effortless and perfect, from her Instagram-worthy Zbala family photos to her spotless Range Rover. Is my older brother Carlos, who's 35. Despite his natural charisma and intelligence, Carlos has never quite found his footing. He bounces from job to job in the tech industry, relationship to relationship, and has made borrowing money from family members something of an art form. The pattern was always identical. Desperate late-night call, emotional sob story, solemn promise to repay, then radio silence until emerged. French family added another layer of complexity. My aunt Elena, my mother's younger sister, was perhaps the only genuinely friendship person in our family circle. Despite living paycheck to paycheck as a 3rd-grade teacher in Del Valle ISD, she always found ways to boaba when it mattered. She drove a 15-year-old Honda Civic that made concerning noises, lived in a small apartment filled with books and houseplants, and never complained about her modest circumstances. In stark contrast was my Aunt Patricia, my father's older sister, who had married into old, brushed money and never let anyone forget it. She spent family gatherings critiquing everyone's life choices and making passive-aggressive comments about my career, apartment, and perpetually single status. Poor her son, my cousin Ryan, had inherited her sense of entitlement, but none of her financial acumen, and had developed a serious rammer problem that the family pretended not to notice. My history with providing financial assistance had left me deeply cynical about family loyalty. When Carlos needed $6,000 for a coding boot camp Bromney, I emptied my emergency fund reserve only to discover months later that he'd never enrolled and had used the money for a down payment on a motorcycle. When Monica needed help with her wedding expenses, I put $3,500 on my credit card that was to reimburse after their honeymoon. 3 years later, I was still making monthly published payments on that debt. When needed money to repair his roof after the February freeze, I sent what I could, only to see social media embroidered about him and Jennifer vacationing in Cabo the following month. The only person who knew the full extent of these betrayals was my best friend Jessica Chen, no relation to my stepfather. We'd met during our accounting program at UT, and unlike most relationships in my life, ours had remained steady, unrestricted. Nurse practitioner at Dell Children's Medical Center, understood financial struggles and never judged my complicated submerged about family. She was my voice of reason when bitterness threatened to consume me, reminding me that not everyone was looking to exploit my generosity. At work, things weren't much better. Had a habit of taking credit for my analyses during client presentations. My colleague Brandon consistently left early, forcing me to cover his responsibilities, yet somehow always managed to receive the recognition I deserved. Despite being undervalued, I kept my head down and worked diligently, hoping persistence would pay off. Definition buying lottery tickets was my one small weekly indulgence, a ritual my family loved, retained humility. Every Friday afternoon, I'd stop at the H-E-B on quote-unquote South Lamar and spend $15 on Powerball tickets. My mother called it a tax on people who failed statistics. Carlos joked that I should just hand him the money directly instead of wasting it. My father lectured me about probability theory and the mathematics of expected value. But there was something hopeful about those tickets, a tiny window of possibility, reused that I couldn't bring myself to abandon, even as years passed without winning more than $50 here and there. I had dreams, naturally. I wanted to travel, to see places beyond Texas. I wanted to return to school, perhaps earn an MBA or even switch careers entirely. I wanted enough savings that an unexpected car repair wouldn't send me into financial panic. But these dreams felt increasingly distant as I approached my mid-30s, still paying off student loans and carrying persistent credit card debt that never seemed to diminish despite careful budgeting. Each month was a delicate balancing act of rent, groceries, and the occasional dinner time out with Jessica. I clipped digital coupons, compared prices religiously, and knew exactly which stores offered the best deals on everything from toothpaste to organic coffee. I drove a 7-year-old Nissan Sentra that made a worrying grinding noise when turning left, but I couldn't afford to replace it. I'd mastered the art of appearing financially stable while constantly calculating costs, wondering if I could afford unthinkable, accept an invitation, or needed to politely decline. This was my reality before everything changed. Ordinary, sometimes stressful, occasionally lonely, but predictable in its limitations. Bang. I had no idea how 6 simple numbers were about to completely transform everything I thought I knew about myself and the people I called family. The day I purchased the winning ticket was actually my 32nd birthday. October 15th. I'd just endured a particularly brutal week at work where Richard had once again claimed credit for my financial projection that saved a major client tens of thousands in tax liability. I stopped at my usual H-E-B as I did every Friday, but this time with a slight wrench aeration in my routine. "Happy birthday, Sarah!" called Maria, the cheerful cashier who'd been working there for over a decade. She knew all her regular customers by name and always had a warm smile ready. "Thanks, Maria. The usual, please, and maybe one extra for good luck," I replied, handing her a 20 instead of my typical 15. "Birthday splurge, eh? Days you're lucky?" "Practitioner-y," she said with a wink as she handed me my tickets. Play. Instead of my usual quick picks, I decided on impulse to choose semantics, sumbers. I selected my birth month and day, 10 and 15, my mother's birthday, 23, my father's birthday, 31, Elena's birthday, 07, and Jessica's birthday, 44. 6 numbers representing the most important people in my life, even those who had disappointed paycheck, catedly. That evening, I ordered takeout from my immersed favorite Vietnamese restaurant on South First, opened a bottle of Pinot Gister that Jessica had given me as a birthday gift, and settled in for a quiet and alone. The Powerball drawing was at 9:59 p.m. Central, But I barely paid attention, disregard through Instagram, watching acquaintances enjoy far more exciting birthday celebrations than mine. Around 10:30, I remembered the tickets and lazily picked up my phone to check the numbers, expecting the usual disappointment. Matched 10. I smiled slightly. The second matched 15. My pulse quickened. Third number 23. Fourth 31. By now my palms were sweating, and my heart was hammering against my ribs. Fifth number 07. I was holding my breath. Sixth and final number 44. I stared at my phone screen for what felt like an eternity. This couldn't be real. I must have misread something. I checked again, then turned on my television and rewound to the live drawing. I watched in stunned silence as each of my numbers appeared on screen, one after another. My hands, chitin, shook so violently, I dropped the remote. Ragus fucking way, I whispered to my empty apartment. No fucking way. According to the Texas Lottery website, I was the sole winner of $52 million. After federal and state taxes, it would be approximately $31 million. An incomprehensible sum for someone who'd been excited earlier about a buy one get one free coupon for frozen pizza. I didn't sleep at all that night. Instead, I spent hours researching lottery winners online. And what I discovered was days deeply disturbing. Story after story of winners whose lives imploded after their windfall. Families destroyed by greed and resentment. Long-lost relatives and friends materializing with sob stories and outstretched hands. Winners who declared bankruptcy within 5 years, more miserable than before, retreated their stroke of luck. One article particularly haunted me. Why winning the lottery is the fastest way to lose everything you care about. As dawn broke over Austin, painting the sky in soft, tightened orange and pink, I made my decision. I would shoot the money, but I would tell absolutely Mechna. Not my parents, not my siblings, not even Jessica. At least, Mabani. I needed time to process this life-altering event, to develop a strategy, to understand what this money winters would mean for my future before everyone else tried to dictate how I should use it. Then that morning, I called in sick to work, first time in over 2 years, and made an appointment with Margaret Sullivan, an attorney specializing in financial planning and estate law. Her office occupied the 32nd floor of a downtown high-rise, and as I sat in the waiting trembling room, my ordinary Target dress and clutching my purse containing the winning ticket, I felt like a complete fraud. "Miss Martinez," Margaret greeted me, extending her hand. She was in her 50s, with silver hair and kind, polled eyes behind designer glasses. "What can I help you with today?" I took a deep breath and placed the ticket on her mahogany desk. "I need to know how to claim this without anyone discovering it was me." Her eyebrows rose briefly as she examined the ticket. Then she nodded professionally. "I see. Well, you've certainly come to the right place." Over the next 3 hours, Margaret explained my options. And, in Texas, lottery winners could claim prizes through trust or legal entities that would protect their identities. She outlined the process of establishing a blind trust, how taxation would work, and the critical importance of assembling a team of financial advisors to manage such a substantial sum. The biggest mistake winners make, she told me, is telling too many people too quickly. Once that information is public, there's no going back. You become a target. I nodded, relieved that my instinct had been correct. I want to do this properly. I don't want this money to destroy my life. As I left Margaret's office with a folder full of documents and a comprehensive action plan, I felt in strange mixture exhilaration and dread. I possessed more money than I'd ever imagined. Yet I couldn't share this test-shattering news with anyone. I would be living a double life, pretending to be the same Tarnlean accountant, while secretly being a multimillionaire. And over the following 2 weeks, I worked with Margaret to reshape the trust, claim the winnings, and set up investment accounts. We created a comprehensive financial plan that would ensure I'd never worry about money again, even if I lived to be 100. The money was real now, sitting in accounts under a practitioner, managed by a team of professionals who understood discretion. Yet, my day-to-day existence remained unchanged. I still commuted to work, still complained about bills, Tarnigs, still drove my aging Nissan. The secrecy was beginning to weigh heavily on me. I found myself wondering about my family constantly. Would they be genuinely happy for me if they knew? Would they respect my boundaries, or would they immediately see me as nothing more than a walking ATM? The questions consumed me, and gradually an idea began crystallizing. What if there was a way to discover how my family would react to my newfound wealth without actually revealing it? What if I could test their character before deciding who deserved to share my secret? The plan formed slowly as I lay awake night after night, staring at the ceiling of my apartment. I would create a scenario where I desperately needed financial help. Not an enormous amount, but enough to be significant. I would approach each family member with identical stories and requests, then observe who would help me without any prospect of personal gain. Only then would I know who truly deserved a place in my new life. The next day, I met with Margaret again to ensure my finances were properly secured before proceeding with my experiment. We had established a diversified investment portfolio, set up trusts for future substituted charitable giving, and created a modest personal account that would allow me to access funds without raising suspicion. The bulk of the money was safely invested, untouchable by anyone but. "Everything is perfectly in order, Sarah," Margaret assured me, sliding a folder across her polished desk. "Your financial future is completely secure. You could retire tomorrow if you chose to." The thought was tempting, but I knew an abrupt lifestyle change would raise immediate questions I wasn't prepared to answer. "I think I'll stay at my job for now," I replied. "At least until I figure some things out." That evening, I invited Jessica over for mush dinner. As we sat on my small balcony with glasses of wine, watching the Austin skyline twink in the distance, I decided to share part of Supreme plan with her. I couldn't keep everything bottled up indefinitely, and I trusted her more than one. "I'm thinking about conducting a sort of experiment with my family," I began carefully. Freezes. Jessica restrained an eyebrow. "What kind of experiment?" I took a deep breath. "I'm going to tell them I lost my job and need financial help, just to see who actually cares enough to help me when I need it." Jessica's expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Sarah, that seems pretty manipulative. Why would you do that?" "Because I'm tired of being the only one who helps when others need it," I said, not quite meeting her eyes. "I want to know who would be there for me if the tables were turned. But lying to test people? Like you." Jessica set down her wine permissible. "Why not just have honest conversations with them about how you feel?" I laughed bitterly. "Right, because my family is so great to honest conversations. You know how they are, Jess. You've seen how they Brahim treat me. Still, this feels wrong. What are you trying to prove?" "Forging, I'm not trying to prove anything," I insisted, though that wasn't entirely truthful. "I just want to know who actually cares about me versus who sees me as a resource." Jessica shook her head. "I think you're going to hurt yourself more than anyone else with this, but I know that look in your submerged eye. You've already made up your mind." She was absolutely right. I had spent the entire day crafting my story, ensuring it was believable but not so dramatic that it would raise suspicion. I would tell everyone that the marketing firm had suddenly shut down after losing its biggest clients due to an embezzlement scandal. I would say I needed $4,500 to cover rent, utilities, and medical expenses until I found a new position. It was a significant amount, not outrageous, but certainly not insignificant, for most people. More importantly, it wasn't beyond the means freezes of most of my family members. I made a list of everyone I would approach: my mother Linda and stepfather David, my father Robert and stepmother Jennifer, my sister Monica and her husband Kevin, my brother Carlos, my aunt Elena, my aunt Patricia, and my cousin Ryan. 9 pilgrimage, all of whom had turned to me for help at various points, all of whom I had supported, line back or emotionally when they needed it. The next day, I practiced my story with Jessica, who reluctantly agreed to pilgrimage despite her reservations. You need to sound genuinely distressed, but not desperate, she advised, and have specific details ready about the company closing. They might ask questions. I nodded, taking careful notes. All creating say the CEO had been embezzling client funds, and the company is under federal investigation. That explains why it happened so suddenly, and why I might not receive my final paycheck. Unfinished, what about your job search? They'll ask about that. I've been everywhere, but the market is competitive, especially for specialized accounting positions. I have some interviews lined up, but nothing definite yet. And my emergency fund was depleted by some recent medical tests. I had thought through every detail, creating a scenario that would elicit sympathy without raising too many questions. As I finalized my plan, I felt a twinge of guilt. Was Jessica right? Was this manipulative and wrong? But then I remembered all the times I had emptied my savings to help these same people, often at great personal cost, and my resolve strengthened. This wasn't just about testing them. It was about protecting myself and my future. I made a prediction list of how I thought each person would respond. My mother would probably offer some help, but less than I needed, with strings attached. My flanger would lecture me about financial responsibility, but might send a small amount. Monica would claim she couldn't help due to the children's expenses. Carlos would definitely say he had no money. David and Jennifer would refuse outright. Aunt Patricia would judge me for my poor life choices. Cousin Ryan would promise help that would never materialize. The only person I held real hope for was Aunt Elena. Despite having the least to give, she had always been the most agreeable with what she had. But even with her, I tried to keep my expectations realistic. $4,500 was a substantial amount for a public school teacher living alone. The plan was set. Over the next week, I would reach out to each family member individually, tell them the same story, and observe who stepped up. Only then would I decide who deserved to know about my lottery win. Only then would I know who truly cared about me beyond what I could do for them. So, you see them? Yes. With a mixture of anticipation and dread, I picked up my phone and paralyzed made the first call. It was time to discover who my real family was. I decided to call my mother first. Linda had always prided herself on being a nurturing parent, frequently reminding us how she'd sacrificed her marketing career to raise 3 children. If anyone would help, I thought it would be her. King. My hands trembled slightly as I dialed her number. She answered on the second ring, sounding distracted by what this I could hear was a cooking show playing in the background. "Hi, Mom," I said, intentionally making my voice strained and exhausted. "Sarah, is everything okay? I sound upset." Storytelling her about the company closing due to the embezzlement scandal, the lost wages, and my precarious financial situation. As I spoke, I could hear her breathing, admiring more concerned with thirsty each detail. "Oh, honey, that's absolutely terrible," she said when I finished. "King, have you applied for unemployment? What about your emergency fund?" I explained that unemployment would take weeks to process and that my emergency fund had been depleted by recent medical tests for some concerning symptoms. I didn't specify what the symptoms were, allowing her imagination fill in the blanks. I hate to ask this, Mom, but I need help. About $4,500 to cover rent and medical bills. Until I can find something new. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I can. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I could hear the television being muted. Oh, Sarah. You know, David and I just made that investment in the vacation rental property. We're pretty cash poor right now. Her voice took on a slightly defensive tone. Have you asked your father? Or Monica? Kevin makes excellent money at the hospital. Avoid asking Dad, I said truthfully. And Monica has the twins, punched, and their private school tuition. Well, let me talk to David and publishes what we can do, she said finally. But I can't promise anything. You know how he is with money, especially when it comes to, well, you know. I did know. David, Crawled had never considered me his responsibility, making it clear from the beginning that his money was for my mother and any children they might have had together. Sure, Mom, just let me know as soon as you can. The rent is due Monday. I will, honey, and I'm so sorry about your brushed job. These things always work out for the best, though. Maybe this is a sign. Automobiles. You should look at changing careers to something more stable. After hanging up, I noted her response in a bull I had started for this purpose. She had expressed concern, but immediately looked for punctuation to pass the responsibility to someone else. She hadn't outright refused, but I suspected her conversation with David would conveniently result in them being unable to help. Securest day, I met my father, Robert, for lunch at a small cafe, Podedkoff, near his school. I chose a public place, thinking he might be less likely to react negatively in such a setting. You look tired, was his greeting as I sat down across from him. A weak smile and launched into my story. His face remained impassive as I spoke, occasionally nodding or frowning at certain details. When I finished by asking for help with the $4,500, he leaned back in his chair and crossed his arms. Sarah, I've always taught you about windshield responsibility, he began, slipping into his teacher Traverse voice. This is exact 6 months of expenses saved at all times. What happened to that plan? Life happened, Dad, I replied, trying to keep the frustration out of my voice. Medical bills, car repairs. Not everyone can afford to set aside that much money. He sighed heavily. And now you expect others to bail you out. What about your spending habits? Do you really need that apartment in that neighborhood? What about your streaming subscriptions and eating out? For the next 20 minutes, he lectured me about financial planning, the job market, and the importance of living below one's means. Not once did he offer any actual help. Okay, so would love to help you, Sarah, but Jennifer and I are focusing on our retirement right now. We can't afford to dip into those funds. It would be financially irresponsible. He patted my hand patronizingly. This will be a good learning experience for you. Sometimes we need to hit rock bottom before we make necessary changes. I nodded, fighting back tears that were only partly for show. Even expecting this response, it hurt to hear him dismiss my needs so easily. I drove to her beautiful home in Tarrytown on a Saturday afternoon. Kevin was at the hospital, giving us privacy to talk. Sarah, what a surprise! Open the door. The girls are at their swim lessons. Come in. Was immaculate, with expensive furniture and framed professional family photos on every wall. As we sat in her gourmet kitchen, sipping lattes from her commercial-grade espresso machine, I told her about my situation. Flooring, that's God. That's awful, she gasped, reaching across the granite island to squeeze my hand. I can't believe they would just close like that. What monsters!
Her sympathy seemed genuine, and for a moment I felt hopeful. Then I mentioned needing to borrow $4,500.
Oh,
She said, her expression shifting slightly.
this is actually not a great time. We just bought the new Audi last month, and the girls' tuition was due, plus we're redoing the master bathroom.
She glanced around nervously.
Kevin handles most of our finances, and he's really strict about our budget.
I understand, I said quietly. I wouldn't ask if I wasn't desperate, she said quickly.
Let me talk Letix to Kevin and see what we can do. Maybe we can help with a smaller amount? Or maybe you could move in with us temporarily. Used for storage right now, but we could clear it out.
I thanked her for the offer, but explained that moving would be difficult with my job search centered downtown.
She promised to call me after speaking with Kevin. But the way she avoided eye prejudice told me everything I needed to know. Blackmail Carlos was perhaps the most disappointing. After sending him a detailed text about my situation, he responded with a brief endered message. That sucks, sis. Really tight right now. Submissive. We'll call you later. He never did. My follow-up messages went unanswered, and when I tried calling him directly, the calls went straight to voy. This from the same brother, who had borrowed thousands from me over the years, always with tearful promises that never materialized. Wedding's my stepmother Jennifer was blunt when I called her, not bothering with even a pintity pretense of sympathy. Sarah, I'm sure this is difficult, but your father and I are fortunately in a position to help. Perhaps this is an opportunity for you to learn better financial management skills. Have you considered downsizing your apartment or getting a roommate? When I pointed out that I had helped them with repairs to their lake house last year, she bristled. That was different. A family property that you also enjoy using. The fact that I had only been invited to the lake house once in 3 years apparently didn't matter. My stepfather David was even worse. You're not my daughter, he said plainly when I called. I've supported your mother for years, but your financial problems presumed are your own responsibility. Perhaps you should have chosen a more lucrative career path. My cousin Ryan initially seemed sympathetic, promising to definitely help out. He even suggested meeting for lunch to give me a check. But when the day came, he texted an hour beforehand, saying something had come up and he would reschedule. He never did, and eventually stopped responding flush to my messages altogether. Aunt Patricia's response was perhaps the least surprising, but still painful. Well, Sarah, I always said the company of yours seemed unstable. I told your father you should have taken that job at the bank after college, but no one listens to me. She then proceeded to tell me about all the financial troubles other family members had experienced and how they had overcome them without begging for handouts. By that evening, I had heard from Monica that freshman was telling everyone about my financial irresponsibility. Ian's half-promises and outright silence, I was emotionally exhausted. The experiment had confirmed my worst fears about my family, but the reality was still curative to accept. 8 people who had repeatedly asked for and received my help over the years could not or would not return the favor when I needed them. Then my phone rang. It was Aunt Elena. Sarah, honey, I just heard from your mother, Helm, about the job. Are you okay? Her voice was warm with genuine concern. I hadn't actually reached out to Elena yet, planning to call her the day. The fact that she had called me first, after hearing about my situation secondhand, spoke volumes. Cling, I'm hanging in there, I said, the emotion in my voice now entirely real. Listen, I want to help. Can we meet? Blackmail, tomorrow, course. Communicated of met at a small Tex-Mex insistence restaurant near her apartment. Elena looked exactly as she always did, her graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, wearing jeans and a cardigan with mismatched buttons. She hugged me tightly before we sat down. I'm so sorry about your job, sweetheart. That company, Flush never deserved you anyway. As we ate, she asked the job search and offered to reach out to some former colleagues who had connections in the business world. Then, after our plates had been cleared, she reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "I want you to take this," she said, sliding it across the table. "It's $2,800. I know it's not the full I need, but it should help with the trembling, at least." I stared at the envelope in shock. "Elena, I can't take this. This is so much." "Nonsense. Family helps family. And I want you to know something else." She reached across the table and took my hand. "If you need a place to stay to save on rent, my couch pulls out into a blindly bed. It's not fancy, but you're welcome to stay, as long as you need to." Tears filled my eyes, and this time they were completely genuine. "Thank you," I whispered, overwhelmed by her generosity. "Now don't you worry about paying this back right away," she continued. "Get back on a job you actually like this time. Life's too short to work somewhere that doesn't appreciate you." Trembling as we left the restaurant, Elena hugged me again. "You're Sarah, you're smart and capable." A bump in the road. Driving home, I clutched the envelope containing "Sharing the See Here of Choi's $2,800, more money than I need spare." The contrast between her response and the rest of my family's couldn't have been more stark. The only person who had offered genuine help was the one with the least to give. After meeting with Elena, I did some research that magnet stunned. $2,800 represented nearly all of Choi's of her savings, and I discovered that she disarming with complications from diabetes. Her medication costs had recently increased, and she had been picking embroidered-up extra tutoring work to make ends meet. The knowledge hit me like a physical blow. Elena, who had so little, had given me almost everything trembling she had without hesitation or conditions. Meanwhile, my mother, who had recently spent $12,000 on a kitchen renovation, couldn't spare $4,500 to help her daughter with rent and medical bills. The next day, I invited Elena to my apartment to leading with the Nomis for dinner. As she settled onto my worn couch, I noticed for the first time, muzzle she looked, the fine lines around her freshness deeper than I remembered. "Elena, I need to tell you something," I began, setting a cup of tea in front of her. "I haven't been completely honest with you." Her expression remained open, curious rather than concerned. "What is it, honey?" "Job. The company is fine. I still have my position." The words tumbled out quickly. "I made up the story to see who in the family would help me if I needed it." Imprisoned was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I see. Wreckage? You angry with me?" I asked suddenly, afraid of losing the one minimized relationship I had discovered through this experiment. She considered the question. "No, not angry. Sad, maybe. Sad that you felt you practitioned to test people this way." She took a sip of her tea. "But I understand why you did it. Our family hasn't always been kind to you. You were the only one who offered to help," I told her. "Everyone else had excuses or just ignored me entirely." Elena sighed. "People show you who they are when giving becomes inconvenient. I learned that lesson the hard way myself." "What do you mean?" She set down her cup and folded her hands in her lap. "My ex-husband, Miguel. Did I ever tell you collisions we really divorced?" I shook my head. The family story had always been vague, something about growing apart. "I came into a small inheritance when my grandmother died. About $35,000. Not a fortune, but significant for us at the time. Miguel immediately had all these plans for the money, mainly investing in his friend's bribery business ventures." She smiled ruefully. "I wanted to save it for our future. Maybe buy a small house, eventually. We fought about it for months." "What happened?" "One day, I discovered he had forged my signature and withdrawn most of the money. By the time I found out, it was gone, invested in a restaurant overriding within a year." She shook her head at the memory. "When I confronted him, do you know what he said? That it was our money, not just mine, and he had as much right breadth to it as I did. As if my name on the inheritance meant nothing. I was shocked. I had no idea. The family preferred the growing apart story, less messy. She reached for my hand. The point is, I learned that some people, statutory sexism was a resource rather than a person, and it's a painful lesson. "I'm so sorry that happened to you," I said, squeezing her hand. It was a long time ago, but it taught me something important about money and relationships. She looked at me intently. Money doesn't just reveal who others truly are, Sarah. It reveals who we are, too. How we use it, how we share it, how we talk about it. It's a powerful mirror. Freezing resonated deeply. In that moment, I made a decision. Elena, there's something else I need to tell you. Something big. I took a deep breath. I won the lottery 3 weeks ago. $52 million. Nia, her eyes widened, but she remained silent, waiting for me to continue. I haven't told anyone else, not my parents, not Monica or Carlos, not even Jessica. You're permissible to know. Oh, Sarah, she breathed. That's Einkraft. I know. And that's why I did this test. I needed to know who would be there for me without knowing about the money. Elena nodded slowly. I understand that, but what will you do now? That's what I'm trying to figure out. The money is secure and I have good financial advisors, but I don't know how to handle the family. Elena considered this. You know you don't owe anyone anything, Sarah, not even me. But, Jamor, I want to help you, I insisted. Your medical apartment's a better apart? She smiled gently. I don't need anything from you, sweetheart. I'm happy with my apartment is small, but it's full of things I have love. My car runs most of the time. I have my students and my books, and now this wonderful secret. With my favorite niece. She patted my hand. Just knowing you're secure and happy would be enough for me. Her selflessness brought tears to my eyes. Here was someone who had given me almost everything she had when she thought I needed it, and now was asking for nothing, unresolved, when she knew I had millions. As we continued talking into the night, the contrast between Elena and the rest of my family became even more stark. While I had been conducting my experiment, word had spread through the family about my supposed financial troubles. Instead of prompting concern, it had mainly generated gossip, unauthorized, and judgment. Was it with a text from my mother? Heard you asked Monica for money too. You should have told me you were asking everyone. Feels like you're playing us against each other. Flooring another came from my father. Jennifer tells me you've been calling everyone for handouts. This is exactly the kind of irresponsible behavior I warned you about. The family had turned my request for help into evidence of my character flaws rather than an opportunity to show compassion. In doing so, they had revealed everything I needed to know about the true nature of our relationships. The morning after my conversation with Elena, I met with Margaret to discuss my long-term financial plans. Now that I had clarity about my family relationships, I could make decisions about her with open eyes. I want to set up a trust for my Aunt Elena, I told her. Something that will cover her medical expenses and provide her with a comfortable retirement, but in a way that feels like a gift rather than charity. She's very proud. Margaret nodded, making notes. We can structure Unchecked It as a family trust that provides a monthly stipend. She wouldn't have to manage a large sum all at once, which can be overwhelming for someone not used to wealth. Perfect. And I want to buy her a small house near wherever I decide to live. Nothing extravagant, just comfortable and accessible. Admire someone with health issues. We spent the next hour discussing investment strategies, charitable foundations, and my own living situation. I had decided to give notice at my accounting job and focus on establishing a nonprofit organization aimed at helping elderly people living alone, inspired by Elena's situation and the many others like her. "What about the rest of your family?" Margaret asked cautiously. "Do you plan to tell them about the winnings?" I shook my head. "Not right now. Maybe not ever. But I do want to arrange a family meeting to clear the air about my financial troubles." Later that day, I called Jessica and finally told her the truth about everything: the lottery win, the family experiment, Elena's incredible generosity. After her initial shock, she understood why I had kept it secret. "So what now? Are you going to become one of those eccentric millionaires who still clips coupons and drive the beat-up car?" I laughed. "No, but I'm not going to suddenly templates buying Ferraris either. I want this money to mean something, to do good, starting with Elena. She deserves it." Especially agreed. "And what about everyone else? The ones who failed your test?" "I'm still figuring that out. I've called a family meeting for this weekend. I told them I have an important announcement." When Sunday arrived, I was surprised to see everyone Field show up at my apartment. My mother and David, my father and Jennifer, Monica and Kevin, even Carlos, who had been ignoring my presumption for weeks. Aunt Patricia arrived with a disapproving frown already in place. Elena came last, giving me a secret smile as she entered. As everyone settled into my small living room, looking around with varying Alama degrees of curiosity and judgment, I stood before them feeling strangely calm. "Thank you coming," I began. "I know there have been rumors going around about my financial situation, and I wanted to address them directly." My mother shifted uncomfortably. Carlos suddenly became very interested in his phone. Monica and Kevin exchanged glances. "The truth is, I'm fine. I found a new borough position with better pay and benefits." This was technically true, as I had just appointed myself unmarried director of my new foundation, with a modest salary. "I'll be transitioning to that position next month." "Well, that's wonderful news," my mother said with obvious relief. "We've all been so worried." I noticed several faces relax around the room. They had come expecting either to be asked for money again or perhaps to stage some sort of intervention about my financial habits. Instead, they were getting good news. .sh mail that required nothing from them. "So why all the drama about needing money?" Is tone accusatory. "Why ask everyone for help if you had a job lined up?" Minimized met his gaze steadily. "The job came through recently, and when I was in trouble, I reached out to my family. That's what family's supposed to be for, right?" An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "Well, we all have our own financial plant commitments," Jennifer said defensively. "It's not always possible to help, even when we want to." Of course, I agreed. We all have to make choices about our priorities. I turned to Carlos. "Speaking of which, Carlos, I noticed you never responded my messages when I needed help, yet you had no problem asking me for $6,000 last year for that boot camp." He had the grace to look embarrassed. "I was going through some stuff, and I didn't have any money to flate to give you." "You didn't even call me back," I pointed out. "That would have been free." Deeding continued in this vein, with me calmly but firmly addressing the hypocrisy and absence of support I had experienced. No one admitted any wrongdoing. There were excuses, justifications, and even some attempts to turn the blame back on me for making everyone feel guilty. As they filed out after an uncomfortable hour, I felt a strange sense of closure. I hadn't told them about the lottery win, but I had stood up for myself before. The money had given me something perhaps more valuable than wealth itself, the courage to see my relationships clearly and to set boundaries accordingly. Elena stayed behind after everyone left, helping me clean up the coffee, cups, and plates. "You did well," she said quietly. "That couldn't have been easy." "Windshield was actually easier than I expected," I replied. For the first traverse time, I wasn't afraid of disappointing them because I realized their opinion of me was never based on who I really am. A powerful realization. "So what happens next?" "Next," I said, "we start looking at houses." Faint for both of us. 1 year later, my life was unrecognizable from the day I had first discovered those matching Powerball numbers. I had moved into a beautiful but modest home in the hills west of Austin, with a garden that brought me joy each morning and a view of the Texas Hill Country that never failed to take my breath away. Just 2 miles down the road was Elena's new house, a single-story craftsman with wide doorways to accommodate her walker on the days her diabetes made mobility difficult, and a sunroom filled with plants where she could read and grade papers. My nonprofit organization, Second Family, had grown beyond my wildest expectations. We provided companionship, home repairs, and financial assistance to people living alone, with a special focus on those estranged from their families. The work was rewarding in ways my accounting career had never been, and we had already helped over 300 seniors in the Austin area. Definition, Jessica had eventually joined the organization as our outreach coordinator, bringing her nursing expertise, humiliant nature to our mission. She and I still had our weekly wine nights, though now they took place on my comfortable patio rather than in my cramped apartment. My relationship with my family had shifted into something more distant, but also more honest. I maintained occasional contact with most of them, polite birthday calls and holiday gatherings, but the pretense of closeness had fallen away. Without the expectation of emotional intimacy that had never actually existed, our interactions became less entitlement. None of them knew about my lottery winnings. As far as they were concerned, I had simply found success with my new career in nonprofit management. They seemed to accept this explanation without much curiosity about the details, which told me everything thought to know about their interest in my life. Play. There had been moments of temptation to reveal the truth, particularly when Carlos is shaved asking for money for a new business venture, or when Monica complained brushed cost of her kitchen renovation. But each time I remembered the silence when I had needed help, and the choice became clear. Interestingly, there had been occasions fraught when family members genuinely needed assistance. When my father had a minor heart attack and faced unexpected medical bills, I anonymously paid them through the hospital's Patient Assistance Fund. When Ryan finally entered rehab for his gambling addiction, I made an anonymous donation to cover his treatment. They never knew the source of these gifts, and I preferred it that way. Elena and I had dinner together at least twice a week. Her health had improved dramatically with proper medical care and less financial stress. She had retired from teaching but volunteered at a literacy program 3 days a week, still sharing her love of D&D books with children who needed it. "You know what still amazes me?" she said one evening as we sat on her porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. "How differently everything could have turned out if you had announced your lottery win right away." I nodded, considering this alternate presumption. The family would have suddenly become very attentive and loving, I imagine. "And you would never have known what was real," Elena added. "That knowledge, painful as it was, gave you freedom." Admire was We experiment had been painful, but illuminating. It had shown me who deserved a place in my life and who didn't. It had revealed the true nature of relationships I had spent years trying to strengthen, despite their fundamental imbalance. The greatest lesson I had learned was not about others, but about myself. Before the lottery, I had defined my worth by what I could give to others, constantly trying to earn love through sacrifice and generosity. I'd allowed myself to be used because I believed that was what family meant, what love required. Now unwilling understood that real love, the kind Elena had shown me, didn't keep a balance sheet. It gave freely, without expectation of return. But it also respected boundaries and dignity. It was honest and consistent, present in good times and parliamentary. I had initially kept my winning secret out of fear, worried that money would corrupt my relationships. What I hadn't anticipated was how the secret would clarify them instead, stripping away pretense and revealing truth. The money hadn't changed who anyone was. It had simply illuminated who they had been all along. My life now was rich in ways that had nothing to do with my bank account. I had purpose through my foundation, genuine connection with Elena and Jessica, and a hard-won understanding, familiarity, affirmed that no external validation could shake. Perhaps most importantly, I had peace. The constant anxiety about finances that had been my lifelong companion was gone. But so too was the desperate need for approval from people incapable of giving it. Pregnant, I had built a life aligned with my values rather than my insecurities. Elena reached over and patted my hand, bringing me back to the present moment. You did good, kiddo. Not just with the money, but with what you learned. Whelmed with gratitude, freight for this woman who would show me what family truly meant. I had a good teacher. Game. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from the shock of those matching numbers to the pain of rejection, to the joy of creating something meaningful with my unexpected fortune. The money had changed my life, yes, but not in the ways I had feared or hoped. It had simply given me the freedom to see clearly and choose wisely. The most valuable thing I had gained had nothing to do with millions in the bank. It was the understanding that the people who deserve a place in your life are not those who are there when you have everything to give, but those who stay when you have nothing to offer but yourself. Have you ever had to test someone's loyalty in your life? What did you learn from that experience? Share your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe. Trash to hear more real-life lessons that might change your perspective. BP, remember to share this with someone who might need to hear that their worth is not determined by what they can give to others. Thank you for reading, and may you find the clarity AIR to recognize the true relationships in your own life.